is Careers of Change. So, good day, everyone. I'm Purushottam Banerjee from final year of Tech. As of the next events we have lined up, it is based on the most relevant question to an emerging student of today. It is the careers of future. What are the new opportunities that are available as well as the key skills that might be necessary for someone to thrive in the post-pandemic world? We have with us three speakers on the topic who have a plethora of experiences, including finance, law, management, and many more. So, without further ado, I would like our first speaker, Mr. Vineet Prasad, who has been passed out from Pondicherry Engineering College in 2008. And upon graduation, he joined TCS, where he worked as an assistant systems engineer for 1.5 years. Thereafter, he pursued his MBA in investment management from John Molson School of Business in Canada, and he is currently working as an associate in capital markets at the Royal Bank of Canada. He has also completed level 2 of Chartered Financial Analyst program and is pursuing his master's law with a specialization in financial law from Osgood Hall Law School. So with this impressive CV, so sir, the dais is all yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to all of you all. I was listening to my seniors actually just a few minutes ago, and I love the fact that they used words, they repeated words like automation, innovation, and that makes my job easier because, well, we're talking about careers of the future. Now, the technology-driven world in which we currently live is filled with promise, but also challenges. And we can all agree that technologies increase productivity and improve our lives, but they've also started substituting some human work that we currently perform, and this will only speed up. McKinsey, the management consulting firm, a few years ago actually put out a very interesting report assessing the number and types of jobs that might be created through 2030. And compare that to the jobs that could be lost to automation. Well, it calculated that about half the activities that we currently do globally could theoretically be automated. Of course, this doesn't mean that all the half of the jobs that we do right now would be automated by 2030, because obviously there are quite a few factors that affect this, such as cost of developing and deploying these solutions, labor market dynamics, true benefits of automation, and social or regulatory acceptance. But there are some very interesting figures for various professions in the future. Considering that though automation and AI, artificial intelligence, will lift productivity and economic growth, millions will need to upgrade their skills or switch occupations. Let's go through a few of these actually. First, by 2030, it's estimated that there'll be at least 300 million more people 65 years and older, as compared to just 5 years ago, which was 2015. And their spending patterns will shift. Essentially, we'll require more doctors, nurses, and health technicians. And I remember, I think just half an hour ago, Jihan was talking about healthcare and construction as well, being impacted. Now, y'all are going to be engineers, and y'all might be thinking, well, you're not going to be a doctor or a nurse or a health technician. How can you contribute, or how can you be a part of it? Well, how about medical technology, creating software or hardware for this particular industry? Second, overall spending on technology is expected to increase by more than 50% between 2015 and 2030. And most of it has already started anyway. And about half of that would be on information technology services. In India, technology professionals are expected to see a 129% growth in labor demand by 2030, such as computer engineers, computer specialists. And there will be a lot of reliance on programming or big data. And we need to improve our programming skills to take these programming or data analysis roles or become a data scientist. Third, investments in infrastructure and buildings are additional to areas that could create additional labor demand. And look at India in the past few years itself. There's been a lot of spending on building bridges, highways. And as the population increases more, people's wages will also increase. And the demand for builders in India, which includes obviously engineers, architects, surveyors, construction workers, that is also going to pretty much double by 2030. Fourth, there is renewable energy in the future. and this has been going on for quite some time as well. And I'll give a shout out to Triple E, EIE, and Mechanical, because I remember when I graduated in 2008, I took up some electives in renewables. And going in the future, or looking at the future, we obviously expect energy efficient technologies and mitigation of climate change. And this is going to create new demand for workers in a range of occupations, obviously, including manufacturing, construction, and installation. Fifth, employment growth in educational professions, post-secondary, school teachers, etc. And India has a very young population. Obviously, you need people to educate them over time. One of our seniors, actually, Charan, who graduated in 2007, I was reading his profile, and currently I think he's working as an assistant professor, and he's expected to speak in the afternoon. I assume that he would share similar sentiments, because the employment growth in educational professions is definitely going to increase in India in the future. Finally, business and financial specialists, lawyers, scientists, and academics could also expect a 46% demand hike. Now, all these various 5 points that I've talked about, all of this is for the future. What is the situation right now? Every year, a survey is conducted by the National Employability Report for Engineers. And I was stunned, actually, to find that in the 2019 report last year, it noted that less than 30% of engineers who graduate are considered employable by the various industries. Let me repeat that figure, actually. Less than 30% of engineers that graduate are considered employable by the various industries. Obviously, there are some factors which influence employability. We need to improve our skills. In undergrad or even in masters, we need to apply for internships, not a week or a month just to put it on the resume, but some solid experience, at least 3 months with practical applications. I would go as far as to say not one, but ideally 2 internships during the undergrad. Number 2, technical projects. This, I'm sure year 3 and year 4 students are actively collaborating with professors anyway, and that will be very helpful when you all interview. However, more needs to be done. How about writing short reports or papers on the latest happenings in the industry that you want to work in, or any other technical topic that interests you during your break? Individuals or team, it doesn't really matter. Write some papers, and when you go and interview, carry those papers and give it to the interviewer. That will definitely improve employability. Thirdly, industry talks and newspapers. I'm not sure how many of you all read a newspaper every day or even a newspaper every week. Engineering students in India generally, we get very little industry exposure. I would highly recommend that you all attend conferences, seminars, workshops, webinars to keep yourselves updated on the current industry trends. Please attend external sessions as well, because that would be instrumental to your learning and growth. Fourth, IT skills. We've talked about IT being a big part in the future, and automation and AI are in the future. It is essential that we improve our coding skills. Learning at least a language is very important, and there's no way around it. Even civil engineers, mechanical engineers back in the day, actually a few decades ago, they didn't require anything of that sort. But now you do. So there is no escaping that. IT skills need to be improved. And finally, point 5, knowledge. Please always keep expanding your knowledge base. You may feel that you don't have time considering you're working or you're studying full time. But let me promise you, once you graduate, you would not have as much time as you do right now. And if you do after graduation, it would be too little too late. And you will never find as much time in the future because you will be working full time. Maybe you'll have a wife. Maybe you'll have kids. And if you all can pursue a master's after bachelor's, it would be very, very recommended as well, or it would be highly recommended as well. Simply because, let's face it, there's a lot of competition out there, not just in India, but in the world. If you can do your master's, it will boost your knowledge and employability. Let me give you my example, actually. I work in finance, and I've done my master's, my MBA. And if I were to go in the finance industry and say, well, you know what, I've done my MBA, finance is such a competitive industry that the person who hears that would say, well, me too, what else? So I need to brush up, improve, add knowledge, skill sets to my resume so that I can keep up. And when we look at jobs that are careers of the future, obviously we would need to improve our current skills, but add on additional skills just so that we can cope with the future. And I would end my speech with just a key takeaway, if you'll want. You all need to keep learning and keep improving your knowledge and skills. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, sir, for the great insights that you gave us. Uh, if I have to ask you something regarding the further studies that we do and how you're explaining me that everything has to add up, okay. But recently we are getting a lot of backlash on that. Furthermore, that a college degree is underviable. Even guys who are very influential, like Elon Musk or stuff, they tell that a college degree is a waste of time or something. How would you counterback it?
I have heard that as well. I've heard a few wealthy individuals saying that degrees are not important. I will say yes, if you're that intelligent, sure, degrees are definitely not important. But how many of us are Elon Musks?
And that is true.
Right? So for us to get a job, we need to show that, well, we have the knowledge. Either you gather that knowledge through a degree, or you do self-study or homeschooling. That's irrelevant. If you can demonstrate that you have the skills to do a particular job, well, you will get hired. The disadvantage, though, is if you all don't have a degree, when job placements go out, if you look at the requirements that are put, most of the time it always includes must have an undergrad degree, must have a master's. If you don't, the problem is for each job, they get thousands of applicants. No human being is going through each resume by hand and reviewing it to determine who gets called for an interview. Most of it is pretty much sorted by software.
Yeah.
Using key terminologies that you put on your resume. Once you clear that, then a human being is looking at it, going, well, you know what? He looks fine. I'd like to interview Purushottam. Call him.
Okay. That's good.
Right. I would say, practically speaking, degrees are very, very helpful, essential.
Okay.
But obviously, it's not a hard and fast rule.
Sure. And what are your takes on like when you join a full-time employee and you, as yourself, you are still continuing on getting on degrees on your own? How do you manage the time to get all the stuff done? If the
I
time
think the
management
only
is
way,
there,
it is there. The only way to motivate yourself is, well, if you don't do it, you will not have a pretty good career.
that's all.
You will get beaten by someone else. And when you're young, it's easier to do it rather than when you have wives, kids, a lot more responsibilities when you're a director, managing director, or whatnot. Obviously, you're not going to do a master's then. Makes no sense.
Yeah. And
Right.
another thing will be you did a MBA for finance, right? For a person like, will it be better to have a work experience, or will you recommend freshers even for a master's?
So if it's MBA, for any masters, I would definitely recommend that we get some work experience.
Mm-hmm.
simply because you get to interact in an organization. You know how an organization works, whether you're doing an MSc or an MBA.
Okay.
You know how an organization works, number one. Number two, if it's MSc, well, you've applied some theoretical knowledge into your practice. And that knowledge would be helpful when you do your master's, MSc or ME. Now for MBA, I would say yes, please, definitely, in this case as well, go get some work experience. Because when you're a part of 60 people in your MBA class, you're not learning just from theory, from your books.
Mm-hmm.
I learned most by listening to other people, what they experienced when they were working. And maybe they worked in chemical. I have no experience about chemical. And they told me how a chemical factory works based on experience. So for an MBA, class discussions are very, very important.
And lastly,
yeah, I would recommend experience for sure. Go ahead.
Lastly, a lot of my friends and the persons who I constantly chat with, they have a bit knack of undermining the Indian B schools rather than the B schools of Ivy League, such as the foreign institutes and all. What do you think about that?
Harvard is Harvard for a reason. Okay, let's start off with that.
Yeah, sure.
Now, everyone cannot go to Harvard. Financial constraints. Everyone may not qualify to go to Harvard. IIMs are very good, and I believe Moneydeep, he is going to speak. He's from my batch. We were in Tripoli, and he's going to be speaking about careers of the future tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And I'm confident that he would say that, well, IIMs are IIMs, and if you go to an elite school in a particular country, definitely, obviously, it's recognized in the country, but it would also be recognized in the world. Because when you go to these elite schools in India, what percentile do you need in CAT? 98, 99?
That is the
yeah.
minimum.
So if you go and tell your interviewers abroad that you were a 99 percentile and you did your education from IIM A or B, obviously it will be looked very favorably.
That's very true. Thanks a lot, sir.